on this episode of the WildFed podcast.
You can make salt pretty easily, but to make a really high-end, fine finishing salt, it takes a bit of work and a lot of trial and error.
Definitely broadens your palate. If I eat food now without salt, it's so bland. It enhances the flavors of everything.
You guys are in a very, very ancient marketplace now. People rely on it so heavily, but almost have no idea where it comes from.
You need it for survival. There's been wars fought over it. It's been a huge part of history since the beginning of time.
When you get like table salt, you're talking about white flour versus whole wheat or maple syrup compared to white sugar.
Nothing's been changed. All we're doing is taking it out from the ocean.
Really good food and mediocre food, it's like sometimes the difference is just a little salt.
Salt might taste like salt, but when you change the texture, it really does change the entire dynamic of it.
Just enjoy your food with salt.
Episode 84 of the WildFed podcast, Making Sea Salt with Lauren and Cathy of Slacktide, is brought to you by Surthrival. Surthrival is a nutritional supplement company developed by me to deal with the health issues that emerge from our modern lifestyle. Whether it's invigorating your immune system, igniting your hormone systems, restoring your digestion, raising your vitamin D levels, or helping you supercharge your metabolism, Surthrival can help you reach your health goals with wholesome, nature-based supplementation. Surthrival carries premium plant, fungi, and animal-based supplements like medicinal mushrooms, colostrum and elk antler formulas, pine pollen tinctures, and more. Head over to surthrival.com to check out the entire lineup. Today's episode is also brought to you by the Hunter's Journey online mentorship program. Whether you're wondering if becoming a hunter is right for you, you're ready to start a hunting journey of your own, or you're a beginner hunter working towards your first harvest, hunting can be daunting. Where do you start? What gear and knowledge do you need? And what do you do when your strategy's not working? Most importantly, how do you hunt ethically and sustainably? An ancient and essential part of the hunter's journey is having a mentor to pass on their decades of experience and guide you on your own journey. Chris Gilmore, our guest from episode 58 on tracking and awareness, has created a comprehensive online hunter mentorship program called The Hunter's Journey. If you're ready to start or improve your hunting, check out thehuntersjourney.com. There's an early bird special running right now till summer, and all WildFed listeners get an additional $100 off with the coupon code WildFed100. Head over to thehuntersjourney.com, enter WildFed100, and learn to hunt with skill, respect, and heart. I'm Daniel Vitalis, and you're listening to the WildFed podcast, a show about reconnecting with nature through hunting, fishing, foraging, and food. WildFed. Food is all around you. There's few things in life as important to humanity as salt. It's been a strong force shaping historical events, and it will likely shape many future events too. Today, for the bulk of those consuming it, salt is simple refined sodium chloride. But I've got a strong interest in natural salts, and in particular, whole, unrefined sea salt. That's still sodium chloride, but with all the associated trace minerals that are found in seawater. It's much more a seawater concentrate than it is a refined chemical. I'd played around with making salt a few times, mostly from saline hot springs, dehydrating off water in the desert sun, and leaving behind the salts. However, despite living close to the sea, I hadn't really gotten into making my own sea salt yet. While I understood the process in theory, I wasn't really sure how to execute it. So when Lauren and Cathy from Slacktide in York, Maine invited us over to see how they produce their small batch pure sea salt, we eagerly accepted. Just before recording this interview, we boated from their headquarters on the York River out into the open ocean to gather some seawater and then brought it back to start the salt-making process. I was blown away to learn that 35 gallons of seawater yields about 10 pounds of sea salt. For me, that means, at least in theory, I could start doing a little of this at home and maybe even become salt independent. It's a new goal, at least. But for now, I've been loving their salts. Big crystallized flakes of pure sea salt on venison and vegetables, and their flavored salts too, particularly on the fresh haddock I've been catching and cooking this spring. So we sat down over a glass of Lambrusco and did a salt tasting as we recorded. So enjoy this interview, and remember to stay salty. I want to start with a cheers. Thank you guys so much.
Cheers.
And cheers to your wonderful company and your success. We'll take a sip here.
of this fine Lambrusco. All right, we got Cathy.
Yes.
We got Lauren. Yes. And we got Grant Giuliano, producer of the WildFed show.
Thanks for having us, ladies.
And we're out here in York, Maine to visit Slacktide Sea Salt. That's you guys, isn't it?
Yes.
It is.
My lips are slightly burning from ghost pepper.
Me too. my whole stomach is burning a little bit.
Yeah, so we just got done a nice sea salt tasting. How did this company come to be?
It was Lauren's idea.
Are you blaming her?
She had a nice retirement planned, and then we ruined that for her. I had been making sea salt for friends and family for a while, and I think we just have always kind of bounced back and forth plans for a business.
Yeah.
Kath and Steve and Dave and I, our families. And it kind of dawned on us. We were out on the boat every day, and we'd been getting water again to make it personally. And we said, I just wonder if there's a market for this, if anybody else would appreciate this the way that we do. And after testing it with some friends and family, it was kind of an immediate response.
Like everybody
loved it.
It's really interesting because, like, is there a market for it? It's a funny question when you think about salt's probably one of the things with the oldest market in the world, right? And then you think about the amount people are consuming day to day to day. It's like there's definitely a market, but is there a market for this kind of artisanal salt? What's your relationship to each other?
This is my aunt.
Okay. For context, we're in a Buckminster Fuller dome, a geodesic dome. There's a lot of roof surface area here. A lot of art on the walls, very eclectic space. You got bees out there. So you guys are already sort of on the slightly far outside, is my impression.
Creative.
Yeah, there we go. Creative.
It's accurate.
There's a lot of like little stations around the house here for like crafts and things like that. So I'm guessing the sea salt, and Cathy, you're the cook in the family, I hear. Recipe development.
Yeah.
And then you started doing sea salt first?
Yes.
So is it like a craft project for you?
Yes. If I can make something, I'm going to make it.
Right,
if I can get my hands trying something out, that's what I'm going to do.
Okay. Before you started doing sea salt, were there any other like, I might try to turn this into a business or that into business?
With sewing, I definitely, more casual though.
Okay.
This is the first that I really have been just gung-ho passionate, full in on.
Yeah.
I've dabbled with a few things, but really this is turned into such a passion project. And really, I think tying in being on the ocean every day has been such a key thing because it's what we love. It's our favorite place to be.
Yeah.
So getting to do that and turn it into a business has been so wonderful.
And we just got back off the water, so you took us out to show us a little bit about how you harvest this water, so that was cool. So we went out a couple boats, and this house is right on the tidal river here in York, Maine, so it's kind of an easy trip for you guys to get out to the dock, head out to the ocean, come back with it. Tell us, I want to talk a little bit about the company and what you guys produce, and then we'll get into a little bit of backstory and kind of how you do it, but talk about sort of what is the product line, what's the core of the product line?
Well, the core is the flake salt.
Yeah.
For sure. It's delicious.
Yeah.
And you put it on top of your food. It tastes so good. And then we just started thinking of different seasonings that we liked. We wanted to do something kind of Maine-ish, the 207. It has the rosemary and has a nice foresty type of smell and taste.
207 is the one that you and
I think I like that the
most. Now, I would call that one Oodles and Noodles Oriental flavor package mix.
It has
minus the MSG. That's the flavor I'm getting on that. But so 207, and for context, that's our area code here in Maine for people who are away.
Yep.
People from away.
Lemon and rosemary are the main spices in there.
Yes. Yeah. And it's delicious.
Yeah, I like that one a lot.
And then the nubble is this is up to camera. The nubble is delicious on everything. Where I love the 207 on like potatoes and meat, but the nubble, you can put it on anything.
And this one's real garlic heavy. Is that what's
garlic, onion?
Okay, yeah. And Nubble, it being a reference to a famous lighthouse out this way. Yeah,
right off of York Harbor.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's the ghost pepper, which Grant and I are still burning a little bit from.
That's the fun one.
I know. People love the ghost pepper. Some people we know put it right on salad
Yeah.
straight.
Yeah.
It's too strong for me, but it's delicious.
It's spicy.
Very spicy.
Yeah, the first hit I took was just a little tiny one, and then I started to experiment with more. And I did for many years. I was like on pretty extreme diets. I did a raw food vegan diet for a decade, and I didn't eat salt and I didn't eat oil for many, many years. And there was like a lack of stimulating food, and so I started getting into hot peppers. And we would take like habaneros and rub them on our gums, rub them in our eyes. Like, oh, it burns. Just
to feel something.
Just feels like, the stimulation. So anyway, I got some weird backstory with capsaicin, but whenever Grant and I go anywhere, it's like whatever silly, crazy hot sauce we can try, So we're fairly familiar, but I really, I like that. That's a really nice salt blend. Yeah.
It's got a good flavor behind it too. It's not heat just to be hot.
That's it. Cause like a good hot pepper has almost like a creamy flavor behind it, So I don't like if I just taste hot. I like to taste the pepper too, right?
Yeah, you need some flavor in there.
Yeah. Cool. So these, the whole thing with making salt's really fascinating because it's like people rely on it so heavily, but almost have no idea where it comes from. So that's really neat. How'd you learn?
Well, it's as far as the process of making it, the first thing was I just started reading books. I read, I think everyone who has been interested in salt has read.
Is that how you actually got, did you first find a home do-it-yourself project, or were you reading about salt?
So I read there's been a few articles in different magazines, Cook's magazine, I think it is, Cook's Illustrated, and Fine Cooking, Maine the Way did a piece on it about just that's what sparked the idea was, this is something that people do. People can make their own salt. It hadn't really occurred to me till I read about it. And then after reading, I think it was Cook's Illustrated.
That's like one of those ones you'll see at the checkout at Whole Foods or something, right?
Exactly.
Really nice food photography magazine.
Yeah. And so I said, all right, we could try that. And I think, again, if there's something I can try, I'm going to try it.
Yeah.
So we just brought some water, and I started with a mason jar of water.
Okay,
and
like a quart.
Truly, yes. And put it in a Pyrex dish, put cheesecloth on it, and put it outside. And I promptly learned, this isn't really working very well. And you're not going to make, I think I made about a tablespoon
The
of
idea
salt.
is that it would just dehydrate off the water.
Exactly. And eventually it did, but I put, the first go was I put probably 6 inches of water and I filled a full glass pan. And then I thought, cheesecloth will stop things from getting in it, which it doesn't.
Pine needles and things like that.
And it didn't. So the first one I made about a tablespoon of salt with a bunch of bugs and pine needles in it. So not that great. So then we got a little more water, and I tried, a little bit smarter way of doing it. And I tried some on the cooktop, boiling it down.
Cooking it off, yeah.
And that proved to be much faster. And then I would finish it out in the sun.
Okay.
And then we played, again, just learning what's going to make it taste a bit better, what's going to make it have better texture. There's certain things you can do while you're making the salt. And once you learn the temperature control and the depth that you want to put out in the pan.
Of how much water.
Exactly.
Right.
It's going to change the rate of dehydration, and it'll change the texture that you get depending on the heat.
Yeah.
So then once we figured out what we loved to give away to friends and family, then it became, how do we scale this up?
Yeah.
You can't boil realistically. You
Fuel
can,
costs
but
being a limiting factor.
Exactly. You're going to burn.
And also, you were talking to me about this because I was saying to you, what if I use my own maple syrup pan? And you were like, just make sure you have the right steel because the salt is going to pit the steel. Mm-hmm. So obviously cooking, you also have that factor, corrosiveness to whatever your cooking surface is.
And that was still a factor for us was when we started flaking.
Yep.
Before we had a custom pan, because we always hit some heat over the stovetop at the end to get that flake.
Okay.
So you have to get a custom pan made if you're going to do it without destroying.
Yeah. And it's a certain, I'm sure
Certain
there's some number.
steel.
Do you know the number?
Hey, Steve, what's the number?
316.
I'm just make a little note here.
316 steel.
All right.
The texture that you guys created is awesome. It's really like these nice little flakes of salt. It's so pleasant.
It took a while
What
to get.
were you calling it too? Like fleur de sal or something?
It is similar to fleur de sal, where it's a softer salt. It's a really a finishing salt. So this isn't a salt that you're going to want to do if you're baking a big pot of soup.
This
You
isn't
could use
this isn't
it.
going to be my neti pot salt.
Exactly. You could, but it would be a waste.
I use Himalayan for that, actually. I do. But that's no joke. Yeah, but to Grant's point, one of the things, like when we arrived today and we were looking at the greenhouses where a lot of this dehydration's happening, you immediately started talking about you were talking about some of the finer points of the texture of the salt. So it's not just about dehydrating it off, but it's the artisanal process by which you guys are arriving at this very fine grade salt, right?
And there's a lot to that. There's a lot of nuance. And again, you can make salt pretty easily, but to make a really high-end, fine finishing salt, it takes a bit of work and a lot of trial and error.
And so you've obviously got your proprietary trade secrets, which we don't want to get into, but for generically for the listener, what are the like simple points on how you make salt, just so people understand how you arrive at salt from seawater, and sort of what is sea salt versus like the land-based salts too, I guess.
So the gist is, if you want to make salt on your own, it's as simple as going and getting seawater. You want to make sure you're getting a clean source. It's also very important to get it on an incoming tide. You don't want to have everything that's outgoing and have all that runoff from the land and then be scooping it up, concentrating it, and eating it.
You want it coming from the main body of the sea in.
Exactly.
Right, because as we went out on the river, like we were talking about, we passed golf courses, obviously people are fertilizing their lawns, all this, just there's septic tanks and leach fields, all that stuff. You don't want to be getting into that. You want to go out and get water that's coming in from this deep sea, basically.
Exactly. And that's part of why we go out to the ocean to get it as well, is we're trying to get the most pristine water.
Yeah.
But again, if you'd like to try making salt, and for the average person, go get a bucket. You can get it from the beach. Just get it on the incoming tide. Make sure it's clean water.
Okay.
And then it's as simple, again, if you're doing it for yourself, you can boil it down, because we're not talking about massive quantities. So you'll boil it down about 80%, and then you're going to want to cook it very, very slowly. Low heat is what you're going to want to do.
Then you go to simmer.
Exactly.
And just slowly remove that. And then you were telling me that a gallon of salt has about 4.5 ounces of salt, which is, man, that's impressive to me.
Yeah.
That's
Give
a
or
pretty
take.
good amount.
Yeah, you can get 3.5 to 4.5 ounces.
Yeah, because something your husband was telling me was that if you get a rain, for instance, you're going to have dilution, so that would come down a bit.
Yeah, and we also won't collect after any sort of heavy rain anyway, because again, we don't want to run off and you don't want to have rainwater and then concentrate it and ingest it.
Of course, yeah. But so the basics are you're just cooking off.
It's really as simple as evaporating the water out and pulling the sodium chloride.
I've seen a couple touch points I have. I'm thinking about times I've been to rocky beaches where I've seen salt naturally form in little tidal pools that have evaporated. I'm thinking about Peru and going to where there's a salt hot spring in the Sacred Valley where they've terraced. There's just hundreds of terraces, and they just let those pools dry out, so they make salt there. And I'm thinking about being in the desert in Arizona at a hot spring where I would put the water from the salty spring into like hotel pans and letting it evaporate off. And so sort of have a little bit experience making, playing around with making salt, but never at a real serious level like you guys are doing. So I'm really inspired as somebody who likes to do my own foraging and my own hunting and things like that. The idea that I could produce my own salt it's pretty cool to me. But I guess backing up a little bit too, when people get salt, like I'm noticing on your labels, right, it says, this salt does not supply iodine, a necessary nutrient. So I want to talk about what salt is, which is sodium chloride, right?
Yep.
And when you could almost say it's equivalent to like white flour versus whole wheat or something, right? Or there's, trying to think of other examples that'd be like that, coca leaf versus cocaine. When you get like table salt, you're talking about purified, industrial grade, chemically refined sodium chloride. Sea salt, though, is sodium chloride plus everything,
Yeah,
right?
it's wild. It's natural.
Right.
Yeah.
It's got extra minerals.
Tremendous number of trace minerals,
Right.
and all those kind of things are in there. But also, it's interesting to me that almost like you could almost imagine it like a factory farm where you're like, these animals are deficient. We're going to add this nutrient to the feed. We add iodine to our salt
Yeah.
as a way of making sure people don't
gonna
end
get a
up with-
goiter.
You're going to get a goiter, dude.
That's it.
Yeah, right.
That's always interesting to me, like, because it's the same with milk, right? It's like vitamin D fortified milk. I think it's the
Right.
B vitamins are all fortified into breads and pastas because we're eating a deficient diet. Right,
Right,
It's
and at
like-
this
Right.
point, we do have to legally put that
Yeah,
label
legally.
on.
Right.
But the theory is, at this point, I hope our balanced diet would compensate,
yeah, of
so we
course.
don't have to have minerals
but,
added.
I mean, I have to put on so many of my products. They have to say I remember at one point I was working with a clay, and we were required to put on that Prop 76, 67.
The
what's-
California
Oh,
thing.
so
that was
yes,
caused
yeah, where it's
cancer.
like-
it's like this product contains chemicals known to cause cancer. Where you're like, oh yeah, I really want to put that on a nutritional
Right.
supplement. Thanks a lot, because
Well,
it
you
has
can't-
clay in it. Are
you
you
can't
kidding?
buy a lamp in California without
Right.
getting that.
I've been in the airport. I remember, and just in the terminal, there are signs like this terminal contains chemicals that cause cancer. Where you're like, yeah, I get it, thanks. Stressing me out here. But yeah, so you were talking about like this is a whole wild salt. That's really neat to me. The idea compared to, and I think sometimes people will imagine when they see sea salt on something that that's what it is. But a lot of times sea salts are also refined to sodium chloride. So sea salt as an industry thing might just refer to a refined ocean salt versus one of these, right? There's no legal language to differentiate that.
Correct. And,
did not
and
know
a lot
that.
of people will put in anti-caking agents.
Right.
And
Do you know
so
what they use typically?
I don't, because we don't mess with any of
Right,
it.
right.
Some
So-
bad chemical.
Yeah, sodium
We don't use-
benzenate or
Yeah, it's-
potassium sorbate or
For
something.
me, we're packaging something that has no additives and nothing's been changed. All
Yeah.
we're doing is
Yeah.
taking it out from the ocean.
The
So you're
dehydrated
getting,
ocean.
Yep, and you're
Yep,
just getting
exactly.
pure ocean,
Yeah.
which is
Right.
kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's
that's
nothing
really
else
cool.
to it. Like the only ingredient in this is pure Maine sea salt.
Yeah.
Right.
That idea that mammals emerge at some point out of the ocean and that we carry in our blood a sort of little contained sea and that we can't live very long without access to nutrients from the sea. So it's like we have, when you look at the indigenous people of this continent and on many continents, you find that they have like trade routes to the sea, even if they live inland, because they need those nutrients, right? Everything's washing off selenium, for instance, like washing off the land and into the ocean, and
Right.
you got to get those nutrients back. So this is like the concentrated ocean, right? You feed your bloodstream.
Yep. You
with
need it for
these minerals.
survival.
Right.
There's been wars fought over it. There's
Yeah.
been, it's
Yep.
been a huge part of history since the beginning of time.
Yeah, we saw Kurlansky's book there over on your bookshelf, Salt, right? Which
Yes.
is sort of looking at the history of the trade of salt and stuff like that.
I mean, that's, the authority of the history
Yeah.
of salt. And it's really fascinating to hear about
Yeah.
how much revolves around that. When you think of even commonplace words, salad came from
Oh,
salt.
sal. Yeah, sal.
Yep.
Oh, I never thought about that. It
And-
was salary.
Yeah,
of
salary
course,
from
right?
salt.
That's
People were
the
paid in salt.
Romans being paid, I think centurions being paid in salt.
Yep. And
Wow.
at some point, it's give or take, but worth its weight in gold, essentially.
Yeah.
And, a man's worth is salt.
Right.
Yeah,
just-
yeah.
there's
And
all
somebody is
salt of the
salty.
earth. Yeah.
Yeah,
a
or
salty
someone's
old dog.
Salty.
Yeah.
Salty Mainer.
Yeah, that's really true. Yeah, it's neat. You guys are like in a very, very ancient marketplace now.
It's
right?
really
Like
cool.
you're now part of the lineage of salt,
Salt
merchants
making.
from all the way back. And
Well, and it's fun too, especially I think where we live, getting to get out to the ocean. We boat down the river and you
Yeah.
see, even just like the Hancock Wharf, you're going through this little living
Historical.
history of York. Yeah. And doing something that is such an ancient trade, but
Yeah.
doing it in modern day.
yeah, this is a pretty
Right.
historic place here, York, Maine, huh?
It is.
It was neat going out there because we go out the river, get out through the harbor, and pop into the ocean. And so you took us out to about 100 feet of water or so. So that's sort of where you feel like, hey, this is good deep water here, good clean.
Yeah, we try. In the summer, we'll usually we get a little bit further as the traffic gets heavier. We just try to get away from any sort of main traffic points on the boat because we want to try to get the most pristine water
Yeah.
we can. But we wait until it's about 100 feet deep, and then we'll pull. And we try to get down to when we pull our water with our beautiful new pump, we'll go about, 8 feet underwater so that we're not getting any of the surface.
Right.
A lot of the oils will pool on the surface.
So talked about what happens when you get back with the water. What's the next stage?
We have to take the buckets. Well, we take the buckets up here and bring them up to Lauren's, up to the house, to the tote. We fill the tote, or now we're going to fill the greenhouses probably right in the summertime. But you have a 35-gallon tank, so how are you going to get it up?
So we'll use the pump again.
The pump again.
So we filter it again. So when we're out to sea, we'll filter the water when we go into the tank.
Yep.
And then on the way out, we'll filter it one more time.
Right.
We have 2 big IBC totes, and then that's kind of our storage facility for the extra water. And so it'll filter again when we go into the tote. And then when we pull it from the tote, give it another filter, just to make sure there's no debris. Again, when we're pulling it, it's as pristine as can be, but we filter it anyway.
But of course, there's like marine microalgae bits, like you've got all the seaweeds, right? There's like little chunks of, you just want to get all that stuff filtered out, obviously.
Exactly.
Yeah, we don't have too much in the water at all, though, when we pull the water out.
It looked really clean when it
It's
came up.
really clean.
Beautiful.
Not like
really
that stuff would
is.
be bad for you, but obviously for a finished commercial product,
Right.
Exactly.
It's filter.
And then after it sits in the tote, we'll move it over to the greenhouse. And then in the greenhouses, it really is just kind of set it and forget it.
Yeah, neat system. So you had kind of like 2 greenhouses going. One has got all those little trays that are individual, and then one was more like a collective small pool, like kiddie pool type of, obviously not a kiddie pool, but sort of that depth of water. And one of the first questions Grant had asked you when we got here today was, do you fill that thing all the way up? And you're like, oh no, because that actually won't evaporate properly, right? So you've had to learn these little tricks of the trade. I'm sure everybody's system be a little bit different, but are those 2 greenhouses producing different products or the same product?
We'll get back to the show in a moment, but first, how's your light diet? Ever since the Industrial Revolution ushered in an era of highly processed foods, the nutritionally aware have been carefully selecting whole, unrefined foods to counterbalance the negative health impacts that industrial junk food causes. Now, in the technological age, we face a similar health challenge, but this time, the culprit is light. What you could call highly refined blue light. It upsets our circadian rhythm, impacting the quality of our sleep and even upsetting our hormone function and metabolism. That's because the light we consume through our eyes is like a kind of electromagnetic nutrition. Our bodies need crisp blue light in the early part of the day to set our internal clock. That's why it's so good to head outside first thing in the morning to jumpstart your day. But our computers, tablets, phones, home lighting, and vehicle headlight LEDs also use blue light that tricks our bodies into thinking that night is day, upsetting our melatonin production, disrupting our sleep, and even impacting our all-important mitochondrial function. That's where Raw Optics come in. Raw Optics produces the finest blue light blocking glasses to filter out the unhealthy, or rather untimely, light from your devices, helping to optimize your light diet and restoring your circadian rhythm. They use melanin pigment-infused lenses with German steel and Italian acetate frames. They're streamlined and stylish, and they have daytime and nighttime designs. If you work on a computer, spend a lot of time on your phone, or drive at night where bright blue LED headlights are shining into your eyes, you need to check out Raw Optics. Go to rawoptics.com/wildfed. That's raoptics.com/wildfed for 15% off your order. Again, it's spelled RA Optics, and you'll get 15% off by going to raoptics.com/wildfed. Now, back to the show.
So our flake salt, we'll put the smaller pans. We'll use that because we're just trying to get brine from there. Because we use heat at the end to finish our salt.
Right.
And that's how we can really control where you get those beautiful pyramids and the crunchy, flaky salt. So with that one, we do the pans because it's a lot easier. A, it'll evaporate faster, and B, just for the ease of going in there and pulling a pan to start heating. Versus the giant pool, we'll let that go all the way down to salt.
Till there's no water left.
Almost no water, yeah.
Okay, and then that will become what product?
That'll be our flavored salt. Because that way,
Yeah.
with these flavors, in order to incorporate them all, we hit them in a blender or a grinder anyway.
So you don't need this beautiful texture that you have here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Depending on the salt. So up to camp, Boone, and Flake is all made one way. And then 207 nubble, and our jalapeno lime salt coming is going to be made a different way.
It still has a really nice texture to it, though. It's like almost fluffy, the blended stuff.
Yeah, it does stay with that beautiful texture.
It does, yeah.
Which is really cool.
Yeah.
But this stuff here, which is the flake salt, I mean, it's got where you can really see the individual crystals, right? And it's just amazing, like how, I mean, it's a relative, like I see that there's a lot of, there must have been quite a learning curve, but it's like a fairly simple, it's just amazing how far people have come from like understanding where basic things come from.
It's true.
You know what I mean? It's pretty amazing because it's like the amount, just think about the amount of salt that we use at home. And I mean, I have never, you know, aside from those little projects I mentioned, you know, never tried to really do this. So
Right.
I feel like this is something that I'm going to probably end up doing on a personal level.
Yeah, it's just something. It's funny because again, everyone uses it. There really isn't
Right.
anybody that doesn't use salt for the most part. But you don't think about how it's
Yeah.
made and what goes into it. You just
Yeah.
kind of buy it mindlessly and use it. But once you make it, it is interesting to really see. It's fascinating.
So much better tasting, too.
Yeah.
That's what an interesting point is, like when you wouldn't, I guess people don't really think about that. But if we were to sit here and compare this with, like I was saying before, a refined salt, even if it was a pure sodium chloride sea salt, it almost like burns your mouth. Like it's almost like, I guess maybe like maple syrup compared to white sugar. It's something like that where it's like too concentrated, like too much sodium or something. So yeah, this has like flavor and it's really, you know, it's interesting, but also texture too.
Yeah, I chalk a lot of the
Right.
change up to a texture thing. So salt might taste like salt, but when you change the texture,
Yeah.
it really does change the entire dynamic of it.
Who's using this salt?
Well, we ship nationwide, which is
Yeah.
pretty cool. We've got some local restaurants that use the salt, which is pretty
That's awesome,
exciting.
yeah.
Yeah, all the way up to Bar Harbor.
Yep,
We have stores in Bar Harbor.
Oh man, you got to say that again. Say that for us.
Bar Harbor.
For the listeners, that's Bar Harbor. But here in Maine, we say Bar Harbor. Up towards Bangor.
You were talking about a pizza place. Where's
yeah,
that? Kid?
so Z's Pizzeria in New Orleans uses our
Right.
salt on their pizza. So it's a man from Damariscotta who moved down to New Orleans and has this obvious tie to Maine. So the idea of using Maine sea salt was really something special to him. And so he finishes his margarita pizzas with our salt, which is kind of cool to think
Awesome.
about.
Yeah.
I love that.
Everyone in New Orleans that's getting a pizza from him has a little bit of our sea salt on it.
Taste of the
Right.
Maine coast.
Yeah,
Right.
it's great.
How'd you guys come up with these flavor blends?
Well, the Up to Camp, we wanted something.
Talk about what's in that
A
one
lot
first.
of people. Okay, the Up to Camp is a smoky, and it's made over the wood that Lauren burns here.
Yeah, this was the
From her
apple and cherry
property.
that you're smoking.
Yeah,
So the Up to Camp is just the applewood.
Okay.
just the apple wood.
Yep.
And so a lot of people in Maine on the coast, it's kind of funny. They have camps. So in the summertime, they don't stay. They don't stay here along the water. There's too many people, too many tourists, so they go to camp.
Oh yeah.
So it's called. They say they're going up to camp. So we thought, well, we wanted something campfirey and
Yeah.
campy. So that's how we came up with that. We burned
Yeah.
the wood over the salt.
And again, a pretty simple system. Like like a burner with a little tube going into the smoker, which is just a box, and you have trays sitting in there. And so that salt must be moist enough that that smoke just kind of gloms onto the salt.
It does. And we learned over the course of smoking it how wet you want to have it.
Okay.
So when it's too wet, it didn't take on the flavor enough.
Oh, really?
Yep. So, and then too dry.
No kidding.
You get the same thing.
Yeah.
So we just keep it when it's almost dry, but not all the way bone dry. We'll put it in the cold smoker.
Okay.
Let it sit we usually smoke it for 2 days each batch.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. We'll light it in the morning, relight it if we need to, keep feeding it. And then once it's hit that beautiful brown smoke
Yeah.
taste and smell, then we'll pull it.
Yeah.
And we use applewood from our land.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, because you've got some nice little apple trees around here. Do any of them fruit?
The one that we had to cut had stopped.
Yeah.
And it, unfortunately, that's why we pulled it.
Time to become smoke wood.
It was. Yeah. We have one down by the river that still produces fruit. but that's our last one, I believe.
Oh.
Yeah.
And
Our
Cathy,
soil's
I
not
interrupted
great.
you talking about the different flavor blends, where they come from.
Okay. So the next one we'll talk about the ghost pepper. So we thought ghost pepper, we have a real strong likeness for spicy food. We like Indian food in the family and everything. So we thought we'd do a ghost pepper salt.
Yeah.
And so it's very spicy. And we named it Boone Island because it's kind of that's kind of a spicy, scary place, just like our ghost
Can we
pepper.
talk about that a little bit? Because
Oh,
we
sure.
were going off the coast, and you were like, "That's Boone Island," and I'm looking at it, and you were talking about cannibals and shipwrecks, and I'm like, I'm like, cannibalism, like I could swim from that island. So tell us that story.
So before they put the lighthouse up, it
There's a
had been the
lighthouse
site
on
of,
that
there
island,
is now,
yeah.
yeah, and it's actually been rebuilt a few times because that island is kind of merciless. It will, in the storms in the winter, will take most things out.
Yeah.
So it used to be a manned lighthouse, but before that, there had been a few shipwrecks. One of them in particular was in the winter, and when they were not rescued and could not get to shore, a few of the crew members had died aboard, and the other crew members resorted to cannibalism to stay alive. And so that's kind of one of those stories around Boone Island, that it's got a lot of mystery.
And they use that same salt to flavor.
Exactly. Yes.
Steve and I, a couple of years ago, we took the boat out to Boone Island, and I will only go out there when the water was really flat. And so we went out, and it was okay. It was really nice. There were lots of boats out there, and we started heading home back to shore, and in front of us, a pod of whales. Is it a pod?
Minkies? Humpbacks, yeah.
Humpbacks
Oh, wow.
Cool.
in front of us. And it was such an amazing experience because we only have a 17-foot boat. And those whales were so big. I felt so small in the universe.
Yeah.
It was really a great experience.
Yeah. We've had going offshore. Were you on the Bunny Clark the
Yeah.
day that they were blowing underneath us, and so bubbles were coming up like champagne all around the boat, you know?
That's so
But it
That's
didn't
nice.
smell very good, as I
Did not
recall.
smell good.
No?
Yeah, not a good smell, like bad whale breath. But
You don't hear that much.
The 207 blend we kind of talked about already. It's like the lemon and rosemary and stuff.
yeah, but this is
That's my
like
jam.
we tasted this one. We were like, wow, put
It's
that on. I
delicious.
want to put that on wild. It's turkey season. I want to put that on
Yep.
turkeys. you know?
Yep. It's good with all kinds of meat and stuff, and
Meat and potatoes.
yeah, lemon rosemary, just really yummy. And then the Nebel Light has a bunch of ingredients in it, which I can't tell you everything. But
Yeah,
it
I
has
like
a
the
few-
other herbs and spices.
Yeah, it has a few maybe things that enhance Indian food. Mm-hmm. And
Fruits that shall go
just-
unnamed.
It's delicious.
Little
It's good on
mystery.
everything.
Yeah.
It's good on everything.
Yeah, it's crazy the idea of eating without salt.
Yeah.
It's like,
I hate when people think salt's bad for you.
I know.
Right.
That's a big one that's like, it's not.
Yeah, but the thing that's funny about that is like if you were thinking about like somebody who, like, let's say their life is spearfishing off the coast of Hawaii, how much salt do you ingest just going in the oceans? Like
Yeah.
you go put your head underwater, you're going to get salt in your body, right? Like significantly more. This Lambrusco is getting to my tongue. Significantly more salt than you'd get from your food, I would suspect. Like when you spend a lot of time in the ocean and nobody's ever like, oh, you
the
should be
point.
careful. You're going to get high salt. You know,
But
it's
I
too
think
much
the big
salt.
thing is like our modern diet is so many processed foods,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
where you're
Right.
getting the sodium.
Yeah.
So our sodium
Yeah.
level is
Yeah.
all through the roof, but it's not from adding the salt.
Yeah.
It's ingesting,
Highly
like you were saying, the
processed.
cup of noodles.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so instead of the cup of noodles,
Yeah.
make your turkey and put a little of
Put-
the 207 on it,
That's
and you're going to
true.
have a
That's
lower
true.
salt intake.
Because a
Right.
lot of times salt
Right.
is a preservative in the processed food, right? So it can sit in a package on a shelf for a really long time.
Well, and that's why it was so valuable for so long before refrigeration.
Yeah.
Everything was preserved in salt. So it was truly essential
Yeah.
for well-being,
Particularly
livelihood.
like the fishes, like before refrigeration. Because who was it that came up with Bird's Eye? Came up with the flash freezing process, but prior to that, it's like the salt cod.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And everything was like
Yeah.
heavily desiccated with salt. And Grant, you always like to bring up the Salt Bay. Kathy, do you know what this is? Have you heard of this?
Salt what?
Salt Bay.
Salt Bay?
Alex knows.
He's a viral. He was a chef that went viral for dropping the salt from really
It's just
high.
a very funny video of
really?
this chef. He's going like this with his hand. Anyway,
But you should
love
send
it.
them. You should send them for him.
that's a good idea. That's a good idea. But I
This
actually,
is the best salt I've ever seen.
Yeah, the texture, these flavors. I've known some chefs actually who are extremely talented but undersalt their food, and the food is so well executed, but you're like, you want to sneak a little salt on it now. And when I cook, my wife is always going to add salt. Like, we bring the salt pig over to the table, and I'll be like, this is perfect. And then she'll want to put
Add more
salt on it, and you're like, come on, I got it just right. But she's like, I was telling you guys, she says salt's her candy. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
and she has the lowest blood pressure of any person I've ever met.
So she really needs it.
Yeah, like, she needs it to keep her, like, blood in her brain, whereas, like, I probably don't.
Yeah.
But anyway, like, but I think that is one of those things where really good food and mediocre food, it's like sometimes the difference is just a little salt.
It's huge.
Right?
Yep,
Just a
yep.
little bit of salt.
I was in a restaurant last summer in Agunquit, and they finished it with the most delicious salt. And I was with 3 other friends, and I thought, oh my God, I wonder what kind of salt this is. This is so delicious. Like, I wanted to ask the waiter, I wanted to run into the kitchen and to ask the chef, because the salt made the food so much better.
Yeah.
It was incredible. It made a huge difference
Yeah.
in the taste of the food. It just was perfect.
Yeah. I think sometimes, too, we often think about with savory food, but sweets with salt are so good too. Like a salt caramel, salt on ice cream, anything like that, you know, where like actually can balance out too spiky of a sugar.
Yeah.
You know, so I think desserts with this really good. And but salts like this with this, we called it the fleur de sal, right? These flakes where they're
What do you guys? What?
it's French for flour.
Okay.
Salt
Flower of the
flowers.
sea.
Flour, okay.
Salt
Flower
flowers,
of the
right?
sea.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So that'd be de mer.
Oh yeah, fleur de mer.
So de sal is the
Flour
salt.
of salt.
I'm married to a francophone, so
I'm
I'm pretty sure
If Ivani was here, she would let us
she'd
know.
tell me to shut up. But I was
Finishing salt.
I'm thinking about
Finishing
like a salt like that with that texture makes such a, like if you were to get a fresh pretzel, let's say, and it has those nice little cubes of crystal salt on there versus if it just had little broken up pieces of salt, man, it adds, there's something about putting a whole crystals of salt on your tongue that's just like, it's so much better. So I guess like you're saying, if I want to present food and I want people to see the salt, it's like one of those big, beautiful flakes like that. Yeah.
Well, and that's like, it goes back to that texture thing too. So you have a bite and you can actually feel the crunch.
into the salt.
It really does enhance sweet and savory.
Yeah.
Have you guys become like salt connoisseurs?
That sounds like, right?
I kind of have always been into salt. So I'll show you after, but like in my pantry, I have a cabinet of every different type of salt.
Oh, do you? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I've always appreciated really good salt. And I think that's why we started making it, because it was like, oh, well, this is great. Can I make this? So I've definitely learned more, but I've always been very interested in it.
Prior to making your own salts, are there any particular salts that you're like really liked or didn't like?
I always went for Maldon. That was just a staple.
What about Morton?
Less so.
Not so much.
Wait, is more? All right, I don't want to get too far off track here, but is that the little girl with the umbrella?
is.
Is there like a dog pulling her panties down?
That's copper tone, I think. Isn't
Oh,
it?
okay.
Yeah, that's Coppertone.
What's up with that, dude?
I don't know that one.
That's like really sketchy, actually.
know
I
that.
think
Yeah,
they
when
should-
you think
I
about
don't-
it.
That can't be their logo
That is,
anymore.
yeah,
No,
that's
not anymore,
definitely
for sure.
inappropriate.
The dog
I'm feeling that's
pulled
really. So those are two separate things. So she just has the umbrella, because as I'm saying it, I'm like, why? That doesn't make sense.
No,
Right.
and I think their slogan is basically it never clumps or something like
Yeah.
that. That's
It's because they use chemicals.
well, right.
so-
The anti-caking thing and
Yeah.
The more processed. Yes, when it rains, it pours. That's our little.
That's the idea, like it pours
Because
out of there
They
like
invented,
rain.
they invented the pour stop.
Right.
Okay.
They
Yeah.
were the first ones that invented the pour top salt.
The spout, yeah.
Kathy, do you think like you would have had that experience at that restaurant before having started this company?
No.
Like, oh, this is a fine salt.
Absolutely not. And the thing is, when I was with my friends, and I thought I didn't want to jump up off my chair and run into the kitchen.
You were that excited.
Because I thought my friends, they're not going to know what I'm talking about,
Right.
and they're not going to know exactly. Why is she running into the kitchen to talk to the chef? Or why is she? I felt kind of funny about it, so I just went, oh my God, in peace and quiet, like, wow, this is amazing. But I didn't. But it was quite an experience.
So does it broaden your palate to learn more about different salts, or is it just like, why do you need to know about that?
Definitely broadens your palate. Absolutely. If I eat food now without salt, it's so bland.
Yeah.
Well, I think you appreciate it more too, like just the different.
It enhances the flavors.
Yeah.
of everything.
That's the thing. And
It
ties flavors together that otherwise
Yes.
maybe there's you get like a first taste note and then there's a pause and you get a second taste note, but you add salt and then it's like a continuous kind of flavor spectrum.
You just have to buy good salt.
Yeah.
You can't buy crappy salt.
Well, yeah. So what was that salt you brought up that before Grant's Great Morton? John?
Malden.
Okay.
Yeah, Malden
That's
salt.
a French salt?
English, I believe.
I think it's
actually.
English, yeah.
Yeah.
It's really good.
And we
Okay.
want to go on a little trip. I want to start exploring other
Yeah.
salt factories. So there's
Right.
one in Ireland we really want to visit. There's one
sure.
in Wales I'd really like to
Okay.
visit and just see the different processes. And there's so many people doing it so well. And I really just love the idea. And we talk with other salt companies too, and salt
cool.
makers, and we kind of trade secrets and talk to each other about processes.
Right.
And there's a new one starting up in Canada that we've been chatting with,
Oh,
and
cool.
they're great, and just different. I don't know. It's neat. You get like a little salt club.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a neat thing too, is like the market is so, you got 7 billion people who all need salt every single day, right? So it's like there needs to be a lot of diverse manufacturing, and it does make sense for people to work with local salts and things like that. And I had always used the French sea salt, the Celtic. That was one that I used a lot, and their logo is a guy with like a long rake type thing.
Yes.
So he's moving the salt crystals through those shallow water beds, I think, in that image. And I brought up earlier that Himalayan salt, which is weird because people call it Himalayan sea salt, where you're like, dude, it's not.
Well, it used to be in the sea.
Well, technically, every salt.
Technically, all
yeah.
salt deposits used
Was
to be in
sea
the sea,
salt.
right?
That's what I tend to use.
That to me, one of the things that somebody told me about that, and I don't know if this is true, maybe somebody listening will have more information, but a guy was telling me that the machinery that they're using to mine that
Ends up in the salt.
yeah, that the
I've heard
nickel
that.
from that ends up in the salt.
Really?
So they end up with metal contaminants from just the boring and mining process. But also the amount of that salt that people are, you know what I mean? When you're in the city, you see those salt lamp stores,
Yeah,
and they've
yeah.
got those massive slabs of that.
Yep.
I've been inside like giant like rooms, sea salt rooms, like there's those
That
Korean
place
spas that do the
that's
whole wall.
The sushi place we went to in Connecticut had one.
Yeah, they had one of those, right? Exactly. So, but those are salts that I'm real familiar with. But that one you brought up, I've definitely had some interesting salts out of Hawaii, like red salts and black salts. What's up with those black salts?
I haven't had black
The
salt.
lava salt.
What did it taste like?
Well, I think, is it
got some.
charcoal that's in that? Or is
There
It
is
must be
some
from
that's
the lava.
charcoal, but there's also lava and trying to think of the other one. There's one in Japan that's charred as well, and they've got a very specific one, but it's a more of a smoked salt
Yeah. Okay.
than the lava salt.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. When I was in Peru, I was talking about that area with this hot spring that's been, made into these salt flats. And they sell little bags of it, so you buy them on your way out. But I'd be in there like filling my pockets up, reaching down into these things. But at the same time, it was all done like with your greenhouses. They've got a roof on them. This spot, I remember, like you'd be like, "Oh, that bird just shit right in that," and that's just like ending up in the salt, and like everything's just sort of ending up in it, which seemed kind of like a little bit like bad modern hygiene.
Right.
Well, it was another reason why we started making it for our own is there is no regulation. There is no testing. So
Yeah.
you don't know necessarily.
That's interesting. Okay.
So for us, we wanted to do it the best way we could
So
think
aside
of.
from basically like obviously you have to have a commercial kitchen permit and all
Yes.
those kind of things, but there's no assays being done on salts. Like it's kind of willy-nilly still.
Yes, in that sense, where they don't
Okay.
test the actual product. You
Right.
don't submit it for any testing.
Wow, that would be really interesting to see like across the board if there was like a work done, let's say, to look at different, lots of different famous salt brands and to see, because it'd be interesting to see, is there metals, is there mercury, are there PCBs, are there, any plastic contaminants, like things like that. It'd be really fascinating.
Yeah. And so, well, for us, we just do what I would want for my own salt, which is I would want to try to get the purest ocean water possible. I'd want to do it in a controlled environment like the greenhouse.
Yeah.
I'd want to have it filtered. So we really have tried to carry that through when we're making it on a commercial level to keep it small enough that we can really control every step of the process and really have it all be thoughtful and intentional.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the things I'm really appreciating about especially the small scale of it, that, you can really have eyes on the whole process. And it's not like you have 100 employees in there, you don't know what they're doing or something like that.
Yeah, we've said that from the get-go is for us, we never want to be a factory.
Right.
We always want this to be a very craft process.
Yeah.
So if we sell out, we sell out.
Right.
That's the way we have to do it because we don't want it to ever get out of hand where we can't really hand jar, hand label, view those salt pools every day.
Yeah. You do body products as well. Do you do salt scrubs or something?
We do. We have bath salts, soaking salts.
Or do you, as being in the industry, get frustrated by the street drug name?
Bath salts?
Yeah.
I was very mindful in the description online because it started as bath salts. I was like, wait a minute, that's not right anymore. So
Do you know what we're talking about?
No.
Drug bath salts?
Drugs.
There's a
drugs.
couple.
See, I'm the senior citizen in the group here.
I'm being very. Do you know what we're talking about?
No, explain it to me.
All right,
Street drugs.
Street drugs. Okay.
Is bath salts?
Like the marijuana. No, there's a drug called. I actually don't know what the chemical formula is, but a few years back, well, it must be about 10 years now.
Yeah,
there were
probably.
these stories that emerged of people. They would find somebody in the city, naked usually, and there was a lot of like.
So we're coming back to cannibalism.
Yeah, we're gonna
It's a
get back to
zombie.
cannibalism.
Yeah, they were comparing to zombies.
They would they would catch somebody. Police would shoot somebody or catch somebody trying to
Many times.
attack another person, and like they often would be like biting parts of their face off, and they'd be naked, and it would be like what it turned out they were on this drug, bath salts. They called them bath salts. I don't know. I know very
I
little
just think
about
it's
this
cool
drug.
that you guys entered into that scene.
It's a side hustle.
Cool, yeah.
Side hustle.
I have a bath salt story actually.
Oh boy.
I was in Sedona, Arizona.
We need more Lambrusco for this.
There I was, Sedona, Arizona, and we were going. Yeah, you want to pour another glass for this one? I'm off-roading with my buddy, and we pull. Thank you. We were pulling into this sort of area where a lot of people, are taking Jeeps out and stuff.
Yeah.
And we pull in, and this. Two guys come running up to us. I remember they have no shirts on. And they come running up and they're going, "Are you the cops? Are you the cops?" And we're like, "Do we look like the cops?" Like, no, we're not the cops. They're like, "We need help." And then we hear in the background, "Ah!" So I'm like, this is interesting. And then an ambulance and a cop car start pulling up behind us. So we pull in further and I go, "Let's go up to that high point and try to we got binoculars." So we pull up and we look down. And then the cops get out, and they're doing this kind of like linear search pattern like they do. And we can see this other guy, naked, running in crazy circles through this desert area. And the cops are looking for him, and they're, again, doing this linear pattern. But he's going all zigzags and crazy, and they can't see him, but we can see everybody from where we're sitting.
Oh.
And the guy, I realize, I'm looking through the binoculars, he's covered in feces. Like his whole back, he's just covered in it. And we watch him screaming, and then we watch him fall back into a cholla cactus, a big 1.5-inch thorns, lays out in it. Oh. Eventually, the cops get him. He tries to hide his head under a cactus, but his whole body is sticking out.
No.
But anyway, this is
this
is the effect of this drug, and people are often naked because they overheat, so they tear all their clothes off or whatever. But it makes people quite aggressive.
A bad trip.
Anyway, I've never thought about it, but if you're into the salt, and if you're in the salt industry, bath salts is probably a frustrating street drug name for you.
So we have to come bath soaks.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah,
That's very gentle.
Soaking salt.
Soaking salt.
Yes.
Which you probably also use naked, but this is another it's a side story.
But in a good way. In a
Yeah.
good way.
Right.
But yeah, with our soaking salts, we try to do. What I love about it is we try to use other small, other than,
Transitioning into the.
trying so hard to get this back on track.
Like we came here, Daniel, for a serious interview. What is this?
Remember when you were so nervous?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Did you think it was going to go to cannibalism?
Now Cathy's
She's like, this podcasting thing allows this riffraff to be like radio people.
No, I'm not thinking that at all.
So, but you guys do the product with the rose petals.
Yes.
So we will harvest the rose petals locally
For
Yep.
a bath.
for the soaking salt.
Soaking salt.
And we get our kelp from Salt Sisters Farm, which is in Mid-Coast, Maine, and this woman,
Oh, cool.
Colleen, runs it. And it's they employ women in recovery.
Oh, cool.
And they have their own just badass operation of
Yeah.
kelp farmers. And she supplies our sugar kelp that we put in the bath
Oh,
soaks.
cool. Yeah, I just had somebody asking me about that yesterday, and I was explaining how aquaculture for seaweed's getting so big here.
Huge
and,
industry.
Yeah, and that there's so much interesting stuff going on with seaweeds because you have a lot of the lobstermen now are doing, right, they're doing kelp in the off season. And then you have the wild harvest in addition to the aquaculture. And then there's all the arguments about the rockweed and who owns it and who owns the intertidal zone and should the Canadians be able to take the rockweed out of Maine. And
There's
so like
farming going on now too, right? Seaweed farming.
the kelp is the big one. I don't know if there's other stuff, but I think kelp on ropes, right?
Sugar kelp on lines is the big, yeah.
Is the big one. And a lot of the lobstermen have turned to that as a secondary industry now that the rest of the fisheries are collapsed. It's, that's one of the big ones. But my brother's in the recovery world, and so he runs several sober houses in Portland.
Oh, that's great.
And so, kind of intimate with that community, and that's cool to hear them getting turned onto sort of a ocean agriculture thing. Because, man, that's a world where in recovery, if you don't find something, a lot of those people end up, every week my brother calls me to tell me somebody's died. It's brutal. So when I hear about people getting into something that ties them to nature, I'm like, yes.
Well, and that's the thing, and it's such and it's a community, and when you're working on a boat and you're doing a hard thing, and working hard, and you feel like you've really accomplished something. I don't want to speak for Colleen or her own situation, but it's it's cool to see from the outside, like, oh, what a really cool, again, but badass. Like it's just these hardworking men and women that are giving drive and purpose.
That's it. There's something about, even when we go on like a head boat, you get on the boat, you don't know anybody, but you go fish for 8 hours. And at the end of the day, you kind of feel like friendly with everybody.
Sure.
There's that sense of being a crew.
Yeah, it's a community.
That's really cool.
And I think that's huge for, I think, again, coming from, family members that are in recovery, that is such a huge part.
And then the kelp, there's Dave.
He brought bread for the salt. It's fugas. I'm guessing that's fugas in that bag.
Okay.
Yeah.
From Beach P.
Yes. Yeah, it
For
looks
the
like
salt.
it. Yeah.
Fugas?
Yeah, it's a big.
Rosemary.
I'm
It's a
destroying the audio
rosemary.
here, but I can go get it. Okay.
Yeah, let's
It's
do a little
beautiful.
tasting. Okay, I'm into that.
I think that's what it is.
Oh, hello.
Beautiful loaf of
All right.
Beach Pea
berry bread.
Baking Company in Kittery.
You guys want to try some bread?
Yeah. We got some olive oil. Cool. So we'll do a little like live salt tasting.
Oh, isn't that amazing?
Wow, look at that.
It's a beautiful bread.
Yeah,
And it
it's
is
really
so
nice.
Now, what salt is this, though?
We got some contrary sea salt here.
Cool. All right.
Looks good.
So dig in if you'd like.
All right. So we are sitting in front of a beautiful, ornate loaf of bread. How would you describe that, Grant?
It's almost shaped like a tree.
Yep. It's what's the word? It's dendritic.
Yes. Like fingery?
Yeah. Well, like
Right.
like dendritic, like has lots of dendrites,
Yeah.
like a tree.
Yeah.
It's dendritic. All right. How do we do this? I want to
I
taste
think
some
you're
salt.
supposed to pull it apart, right? The
Right,
pieces.
I got
I
some
cut
cut
I
pieces
cut up
here.
a little, and you can either dip it in olive oil or sprinkle a little
All right, I wanna
salt on
sprinkle
it.
Salts.
Let me
Which salts you
Do a
want?
little
Julie?
let me have
both?
the ghost pepper one.
Okay.
Oh, going back for more.
Remember, you were choking the last time, so be careful.
All right. Ghost pepper, salt.
Oh,
And
the
I'm gonna-
nub-
I'll go
would be
dip.
good.
I'll go dip in olive oil.
How'd you guys end up with the name
And then-
Slacktide?
It's my favorite
Did I
time
hear you
in the
actually,
river.
Did I hear you use that today as an actual? You're explaining the river.
Yeah. So, for us, that's when we want to pull is right before slack. That's when we want to pull the water. It's when it's fresh.
Tell
clean.
people what a slack tide is.
So slack tide is the quiet time on the river in between the turn of the tides. So a tidal river is always moving.
Yep.
But there's 2 points in a day when the tide turns where it just goes quiet.
Okay. That's a new phrase for me. I like that a lot.
And it's just peaceful. There's nothing happening. It's still. And there's just something kind of magical about
Because
it.
that current reverses.
Yeah. So during that, you get about, like just this little window where it's not coming in, it's not going out. And it's just.
Fishing sucks, though.
Not great for fishing. I don't know. But wonderful for just that peaceful moment.
Right.
And I've always just loved that bit. So, and for us, we harvest our water when the tide's coming in, and generally we'll come back upriver during that slack tide.
Okay.
So it's important to our business, and it's just a beautiful time on the river.
And you've got
It
two
really is.
logos going on, or two logo designs, because I see one is sort of that original Maine flag that you guys use on some of these. But your main logo is that skiff with the sort of the rowboat.
Yeah, that rower right there.
Okay, I love that.
So that's based on an Alex Katz piece, and he's a very prolific Maine artist.
Okay.
And he does a lot of wood block prints.
Oh, cool.
And he has one that's a rower. And it's just the most simple. This up here is one of his pieces of work. He's really into very simple designs.
Yeah,
and
really clean,
He's got,
modern.
he also has beautiful paintings that are not simple at all, but he's got this rower. And so when we reached out to our graphic designer, I had said how
different
much
ones?
we loved that piece, and he came up with the rower, the little dory boat.
And can you tell us a little bit about that? What'd you call that press down in the basement that you
Our
have?
letter press.
Yeah. So because when you order, I imagine you get in the box, you're getting some of that swag there, or that merch there, that little printed pieces of paper.
So every order we send out will include a letterpress card that we have hand pressed ourselves.
Did you see that down there, G?
Really
cool.
nice.
Really
Tell
cool.
us about what that is.
So it's
Imagine that people have never heard of a letterpress, because I've never seen one till today.
So it's how everything used to be printed before there were printers. So it used to be a typeface that you would do, and you'd take your individual letters and put them together and make your page of type. And then you.
So if you were doing like something complex, you'd have to slide in hundreds of letters to form words and spaces. It
Yep,
seems
and they
like,
all have to be at the same exact height, and quite the process. And we're using a much more simple. We're using polymer plates now, so we don't have to set any of
Yeah.
the type ourselves.
Right.
It's a bit easier, a bit more basic. But you get your polymer plate and you put it on your base, and then truly just pressing it against with a lot of force, and it kind of makes that little indent in the paper that I
Yeah.
love so much. And
But not that simple, because you're pulling this lever, right? And these two rollers run up over a plate that's turning and get
Yes.
inked, and then they come back and roll over the
Rolls over your
typeface
plate.
thing, and then it's just
and then
really
when
cool to see.
and then on the reverse, that's when it goes against the paper and prints it together.
Yeah,
And
what year is that machine from, do you think?
I was telling Kath earlier, my father had it growing up, so I don't remember a time where he did not have that press, and he bought it used, and then he gifted it to us when we started this business and wanted to include letterpress cards and
40s at least?
oh
Older?
yeah, I would say older. So
He's in his 70s, right? Your dad?
late 60s. Maybe early 70s. But again, yeah, he bought it. It was probably 20 years old when he bought it, and it
Wow.
theoretically will last forever. And that's kind of,
that's what's so cool about
it's-
looking at it, is you're like,
it's a-
this thing
yeah.
will last for all time.
It's really beautiful.
and it printed our wedding
equipment.
invitations
Oh, cool.
on it. So it's something that, again, growing up, I remember it so
Yeah.
vividly. So it's so cool to get to use it now for our business.
Yeah, it's really nice that artisanal touch.
Yep, and that's important to me.
Do you have to use the thickness of the card, or does it require a certain thickness? Because the paper that you print those, and we put that's what we put our thank you notes on when we send them an order out to a customer. We use the card, and it's beautiful and thick and heavy. Really nice.
Yeah, we don't have to use that thick. For me, I really like...
Because it embosses.
It's like everything.
Yeah.
Is that emboss or deboss?
No, I think it's...
What's it called?
Emboss, I think, sticks
Raised,
out.
yeah.
So this is debossed. It kind of
Debossed.
debosses in. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's beautiful.
and when you rub your finger over it, you
Yeah,
can
you
feel
that
it.
texture.
Every aspect of your business is artisanal, huh?
I really like the idea of everything being well thought out.
Yeah.
And just carefully done. Things are done with care instead of, there's a reason why things are done the way they are. And I don't know, we try to be very thoughtful and very careful with every step, from getting the water to the letter that we write in our packages.
Tell people where they find it.
So we have our website, slacktidemaine.com. And that's probably the easiest way. And then we have a bunch of different stores in Maine, and actually starting to get across the country.
Instagram.
Yep, we're on Instagram. And again, Slacktide Maine is the easiest way to find us.
So that's at Slacktide Maine.
Yes.
Well, I'm really impressed with the whole operation and really inspired. I mean, obviously not going to try to compete at any level. I'm just going to go make my own personal salt, but I'm just, I love the sovereignty of it. I brought up to you earlier Mahatma Gandhi doing his salt protest when the English said they couldn't make their salt, right? And
Yep. Because they wanted the money. They wanted the tax money.
that was taxation.
The English.
And just a way to control the people of India, right?
Yep.
And so this idea of like, no, this is something I need for life. You can't tax that. It's like taxing my water or something. It's like, no, this is something I need. So, yeah, I like the idea of being able to go down to the coast. Obviously, most of the country is like not really have access. People don't have access to the ocean this way, but
No, but I think anyone who lives on the ocean, it's worth just trying.
Yeah.
yeah, even on your stovetop or something.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Just
And it's as simple as, again, I just encourage, make sure it's on an incoming tide, make sure it hasn't been raining, and get a bucket of water and give it a try.
yeah. Or go to slacktidemaine.com.
And then go to slacktidemaine.com.
and buy the good stuff.
Yeah, we've done our, again, really easy to make salt, not easy to make it really well.
Yeah, I know. I don't think I'm going to get these nice, beautiful
We'll give you some
Fleur de
tips.
sel. Yeah, well, you'll get sick of me after a while, and I'll run out of tips. But cool. Anything you want to leave us with in closing?
Enjoy your food with salt.
I like it.
I like the good
I
motto.
love that.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
buddy. Thanks so
Thank you
much.
so much.
Thanks for listening to the WildFed podcast. You can help us grow the show by subscribing and leaving us a rating and review. It ensures better rankings and more advertiser interest, which translates directly into better shows, more awesome guests, and a constant stream of fresh, new content. Have a question you'd like answered on the show, or a hunting, fishing, or foraging trip you'd like to host us on? Email us at info@wild-fed.com. And be sure to visit our website, wild-fed.com, to check out the WildFed video show and store. WildFed. Food is all around you.